I have a confession to make. I was working on this mix and spent quite a bit of time at the end trying to get the last few things to gel. Specifically, I was trying to remove some of the harshness from the mix, caused in part from what I wanted the mix to be and become, and what I had to work with in the first place. This is a live studio recording, and the issue is that the drums, for whatever reason, every time the drummer gets excited and hits the crash cymbals, it bleeds quite heavily into the vocal mic.
Coffee and cigarettes. Coffee and cigarettes.
Bleed in and of itself, not such a big issue unless, like I did, you want to add a bunch of processing to the voice, which ends up adversely affecting the tone of that cymbal bleed. Now, to be quite honest, the cymbal bleed tone, even without adding that processing, sounds pretty awful. So anyway, I attempted to mix this song and thought I could fix the issue during the mix. Big mistake. I tried EQ, I tried dynamic EQ, I tried multiband compression on the vocals, I tried music rebalance with Isotope RX Advanced to try and pull out the drums. I used good old volume automation, I tried sidechain compression. I threw everything at this problem and kept hitting the same roadblock to finishing the mix. I'd spent the entire mix working towards eliminating this issue and just got more and more frustrated. I'm sure you've been in that situation. We all have at some stage, and I'm happy to say that it happens less and less every year as I gain more experience, but sometimes we get complacent like I did and overlook some fundamentals. And this time out, I really dropped the ball and had to relearn this lesson. So I just want to share with you that lesson in the hope that you too don't make the same mistake. But, you probably will. Let's face it. We all make mistakes. It's part of learning. But hopefully after watching what I used to remedy this issue, quite a convoluted but effective solution, which I'll explain in detail, it may just give you the tools up front to tackle this type of problem and not just sidestep the issue like I did. So after failing miserably many times, I took a deep breath and decided to sleep on it. The next day, rather than try to get back into the same headspace, I just stripped everything off. All the plugins are gone and I started from scratch. But this time around, I said to myself, I'm going to fix this problem before I move on to mixing it again. I knew I wanted the voice to be brighter and more airy, but as it stands, adding top-end EQ really only made the cymbal hits jump out even more, and the cymbal bleed sounds very harsh. So it's a volume issue and it's also a frequency issue. This is just temporary processing to approximate roughly where I'd end up brightness-wise on the voice, but let me show you how it sounds.
She paints up that face to make sure those blemishes hide. Coffee and cigarettes. Coffee and cigarettes. Gallery news around the neck. Don't let up. Disrespect, disrespect, disrespect. Popping pills and posting pics. Stressing on to me, and you're just the way that you should be, yet you're beautiful naturally.
As you can hear, it doesn't sound great. So what now? Why not just settle for a vocal that's less bright and airy? Why make it hard for yourself? Well, if you have a sound in your head, I truly believe that you can get most of the way there if you just put in the effort into the right areas. In this case, I'm using one of those plugins that has really proven itself to be a lifesaver in some situations. That's Brainworx Dyne EQ. This is a one filter or one band dynamic EQ. There's plenty of others on the market that have loads more filters and bands to play with. But what this does particularly well is those odd jobs. I don't want to make this an advert for Dyne EQ, but if you can afford it down the track, I personally think it's worth getting. If you have it, that's awesome. I decided to split the drum overheads. I picked the side that had the loudest crashes and I deleted the other. What I did then was I fed that into the sidechain of Dyne EQ, which I have instantiated on the vocal track. I had to play around with the settings quite a bit, but I've ended up using a low pass filter that sweeps down every time the compressor threshold gets triggered. I've set the sidechain filter up to listen only to around 5 kilohertz where those cymbals are harsh. Let's hear where that gets us.
World is sick, world is sick, world is sick. Well, flower, growing free. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. You're just the way that you should be. Yeah, you're beautiful naturally.
As you can hear, it's far from the most natural sounding and perfect solution. So to control how quickly that happens, I'm using a fast attack time and a fast release. The threshold also can affect how quickly this happens, but the threshold in this case is low. It's always listening for a trigger. The reason for that is that I had issues finding the sweet spot. So I did a few more experiments and I came up with a few more steps to make sure the compressor reacted only when there was an issue. To really zero in on the harsh bleed, the sidechain overhead track has some filtering and a large peak at around 5 kilohertz as well. But that wasn't enough. So I muted the entire sidechain overhead region and then I selectively unmuted each crash hit as required. Finally, to get it sounding as natural as possible, I employed some fades and in some cases I used clip gain to drive or back off some of the crashes feeding into Dyne EQ's sidechain. What's really great about this is I could change the length of the fades, the slope and the loudness of each. Could I have just automated a low pass EQ on the vocals? Possibly, but I think it may have resulted in more detailed automation than I was willing to sacrifice my sanity for. So I love the fact that I can see where each crash is happening and I can quickly slide the fade around and adjust the slope to get the exact response that I need from Dyne EQ. I'm actually controlling the release of the compressor by the slope and graduation of the fade, which is awesome. So I can actually see exactly how that release is working. And if any new issues crop up during mixing, as I add more processing, I just need to unmute the offending region and I can go through that process. Hopefully I don't need to do that. For the most part, I'm pretty happy. Like here's some examples of where I finished up after adding some more processing to the voice, just so you can see how this would work in context with the mix as I make further changes.
Coffee and cigarettes. Coffee and cigarettes. Coffee and cigarettes. World is sick from flower to flower. World is sick from flower to flower. World is sick from flower to flower. World is sick from flower, flower to flower, flower, flower to flower.
So as you can hear, it's actually done an amazing job of cleaning up that bleed whilst keeping it sounding as natural as possible. I'd never think that low passing a voice would work quite so well, but it just does. And I think of all the filter types that I could have chosen, this one worked the best because it just removes that broadband high-pitched harshness as it happens. And as it releases, it allows the less harsh cymbal bleed to come through. You don't miss that top end from the vocals because the cymbals naturally fill that space. but we're not getting that harsh cymbal tone coming through the vocal mic. So I've fixed that issue. And once I've fixed that issue, I can actually move on to mixing. And lesson learnt. Again, hope you learnt a few new tricks. Thanks for tuning in. All my links are in the description. Smash that like button. Share this video if you know of anyone else who could benefit from this lesson. As ever, happy mixing and see you next time.